Welcome, everybody, to Meet the Experts series. I'm Rachel Leonard, editorial director of the Bridal Council, and today I'm so lucky to be speaking to Marcy Blum, my old friend. We've known each other forever. She's been named
Welcome.
Best Wedding Planner for Vogue, Martha Stewart, Harper's Bazaar, Brides, you name it. She makes extraordinary weddings, memorable moments. Welcome, Marcy.
Thanks, Rachel. Good to be here.
So glad to see you. I mean, how long have we known each other? I hate to say it, but it was like early on in our bridal career, right? I was at Brides.
Yeah, you were at Brides. I don't know. I'm at least 30 years. Is that possible?
Yeah.
I think more or less. Yeah. Mhm. Right.
And you met, you met Barbara Tober first. Was that how you got into this
I
or
met Barbara Tober. Yeah. No, actually, I was, I had graduated Culinary Institute and I was working for someone who became my husband, is now my ex-husband and still good friend. And he was very good friends with Donald and Barbara Tober. And I had this idea about starting a artisanal wedding registry.
oh,
So he introduced me to Barbara, and I went and met with her. And I don't think she thought it was the most clever idea of all. But the next time I met her, a couple years later, I had started a wedding planning business, which I thought was extremely innovative. I didn't think anybody else did it. There weren't thousands and thousands like there
no,
are now,
no, you were really one
but
of the
there
first ones.
were
Yeah,
one of the beginning.
right.
And Barbara was, as were all of you, you and Millie and Maria McBride and Barbara's all the girls were all very, very helpful to me. And in those days, I mean, there were very few planners who would go to dress fittings or to trunk shows or things in bridal. I think I was one of the only ones, and that's how you and I became friends. And you were always at all the fashion shows, first row, of course. And we just, there was it wasn't like it is. It wasn't a marketing scene. It was very, very different.
I
Yeah,
know. Miss those days, some of them. So
yeah,
so your weddings are booming right now, correct?
absolutely crazy. Yeah, it's really something.
That's that's so I'm so happy to hear, and of course that's what you would expect once that we're out of the pandemic. But how our brides are they in a different mood than they were before the pandemic? Is it a different other things more important? What's going on?
I think you know, there's several different categories. There are still people who just got engaged during pandemic, so as far as they're concerned, this is the first rodeo, so they're pretty much like all our usual brides. And then for example, we just had lunch with a couple who has is getting married in Italy, and they had postponed their wedding for a year. And they were working with someone in Italy, and then the pandemic happened, and then so they're coming at it with fresh eyes, and those people are in a particularly celebratory mood, and they're so happy that they can get to do this. And I mean, Italy today, the restrictions on COVID flights, et cetera, were lifted. So little by little, we're seeing the world come back to normal.
Right.
And not just weddings. I mean, all my clients who are involved in any sort of entertaining are super psyched about it. Like, people feel like, oh my God, some of us, including myself, weren't sure that we were ever going to see normality again of any sort. So it's
So
fun.
yeah, just gathering is so major, and
Back,
that's
yeah.
what you do. Um, what do you do that makes a wedding more unique and special and memorable, other than to take it out of that cookie cutter?
Well, for the first, generally we don't work a lot in hotels or banquet
Oh, interesting.
spaces.
That's it.
Um, Not that it's not doable there, but it's harder because there's a structure. There are, menus that even if you try to switch it up, you're never sure if they can actually pull it off. So most of our events particularly weddings are done at someone's property or someplace that might not be ordinarily considered for a wedding, a music venue or something like an estate. But
That makes sense.
yeah, and we also I try to look at each one, which I know is not the easiest thing in the world, as if it's brand new.
Right.
So
Make
you
fresh.
have some of the right. You have some of the tenets, like I did this once and it was a mistake, so not to do that. But at the same time, you want to look at it. Well, are you sure you want to have that particular party in the evening? Maybe you want to do that as a lunch instead. I mean, try to mix it up. Almost all of our weddings now, especially the destination weddings, but even the ones that are local in New York, are multi-day events. Almost always.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's been that way for a while.
For a long
I
time,
would say
right? So you have to look at the party. If you're doing a
whole
formal
weekend.
sit-down wedding
Yeah.
reception, you want to do some informal and fun and maybe a little out there for the night before. You want to look at it as an ensemble piece, kind of.
You bring
Yeah,
them through a story
right,
for the weekend.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So what would you say your best skills are for planning, event planning?
Uh, hmm. Well, I think, I said to you, I actually, probably my best skill is, although it does get rusty sometimes, is I really genuinely like people. For the most part, they have to prove to themselves, that I shouldn't like them. So I really, and I, for the most part, I do like people. I mean, my father was a salesperson. He really liked people. My mother liked people, but she was much shyer and much more discreet than either my father or I. So, and I try to listen to what they're really saying, even if they're not verbalizing it, but what are they really thinking? What are they envisioning that I can make happen, or maybe talk them out of happening even? But something like what is the essence of what they're looking for? And it may not be, some people do want to show off. Other people, it's just the opposite. They want to have a fabulous party where they honestly don't want people to know how much they spent, but they want it to be spectacular anyway.
Right.
Um, some people, some brides want to show their future in-laws that they know how to entertain.
Mhm.
Um, people have all different agendas in this. It's not just I want it to be the best day of my life, but what does
Right.
that entail? And I try to listen to those things and then see. Sometimes we're working with someone who is let's say, either the bride or groom is a celebrity and one of them is not, which is often the case, or fabulously wealthy or comes from a fabulously wealthy family. And I always take the position, I want to really find out the other person who is not the spotlight.
Right. Right.
How do
That,
we help
that's
them get through it, and how do we advocate for them,
yeah.
and get them what they want? Yeah.
That must be very tricky because I'm sure they don't want
I
it
think I spent
right.
in therapy for like 40 years, so much more helpful than anything
So you
else I've
think
done.
about the guests too. You were telling me like
Yes, thank you. And we do. We look at, um, so, couples, even couples who are not incredibly self involved, are not used to entertaining. So they might say, oh, well, we love hip hop, or which is great. They may, but I'll say, well, let me see the guest list, because if it's 50% your parents' friends and 50% your friends, even if you love hip hop, half the guests are going to be miserable.
right.
And so maybe we do that at the after party, or maybe we do a set, or maybe it's a particularly, I mean, I'm 150 years old and I personally love hip hop, but you have to look at the guest list with the clients and say, who are these people and what are they? If they really exist, or majority of the guests are from the Midwest and been eating mac and cheese their whole lives, you don't want to serve them something ridiculous just because you think it's fancy, because they're not
Right.
going to be happy. And the idea, and nobody's ever happy if the guests aren't happy. So
Right.
that's the first rule. Figure out not only the demographic, but the taste and style of the guests. And at the same time, if it's, most of our clients have a lot of money, they spend a lot of money, but sometimes we have to really, roll it back a little because there's a whole family group that's coming that would just be so awed by it that they wouldn't be able to function in that
Right,
setting.
right. That's great that you consider everybody attending, and the flow of the weekend sounds very important. And so you're
I
the
think
master of the overall aesthetic and the logistics, and this probably
right,
keeps it very unique. Do you use different vendors, the same vendors? How does that work?
we use a lot of different vendors. There are people that we rely on for all sorts of talents that they have, and sometimes we use them in a mixture. There may be someone who is an extraordinary floral designer, but perhaps they're not the best stage set builder.
Mhm.
Perhaps they are, but if they're not, then we have to bring in another company to build the bars or to build the chandeliers or the structures, or it's there's a lot of people involved. It's a little more complicated than it used to be. We just hire a designer or a florist. I mean, if
Right.
you called any of these people florists now,
They don't like
that's,
that.
no, they don't like that. No, no, the same way
They're
if you called me a wedding coordinator, I'd be pissed.
exactly, exactly. No, it's really become quite an art form, I would say. Today, the events, they're like masterful events. They're creative. It's very creative. I mean, full time. Um, and then on the other end, do you take the clients shopping? Do you help select their wardrobe? And
I personally am very involved in fashion because I like fashion, and I've
yeah,
always found that that would be, um, you know, I thought that was one of the fashion and the food was really the most fun parts of it. So I thought if I'm going to have to do the hair and makeup and transportation schedules, I should get to do the tasting and the shopping. Certainly, watching other colleagues and developing an idea of what works and what doesn't work, or what works for a photo shoot and what might not work for a wedding, because which is,
right.
as you know,
Too
a
different.
real issue these days, right? People walking around in their lingerie, at a church ceremony, things like that. But so while on occasion we work with stylists because some of our clients really need a full time stylist, or they're spending, we're talking about couture or that kind of thing. And even with that, most of the time I'll do the initial shopping trips with the bride and the groom, or the brides and the grooms, or yeah,
Uh-huh.
and also often the mothers of each, because I think sometimes I'm a very objective eye. So even before they bring, best friend, or sometimes with the best friend, but before the mother is involved, they want someone to say, this is, I know my mother's going to want these giant prom dresses. So before I even look at that, can
Right.
we sort through it and see? So
Right.
we sort of,
Yeah.
tailor what she's going to see. Yeah.
Taylor, the one last question for you. You like to do great surprises to make it unique. What are some of your favorite that you've done?
Good question. Well, a performer is always fun. It doesn't have to be a celebrity performer, but it could be, or it doesn't have to be an A-list celebrity, but it could be, you know, uh, someone's favorite something that they don't even know that people know that they love this particular song or this particular musician or this particular DJ, or a wedding we did during COVID. Gabrielle, my event director, did, where we had the Goo Goo Dolls, the lead singer,
Wow.
zoom in and do the first dance, and it was a lot more reasonable during, via Zoom than it was in person. So, and that was their favorite band, favorite song. So things like that, just a snippet of something, or,
Bring it to
you
another
know,
level.
we'll do a wedding with an after party, but instead of having an announcement, we'll drop a little sequin card on each plate. Say, here's where the after party is. Join us there. Some of the, things that are not expected, hopefully.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Marcy, for your
Thank you,
time.
my
It's
friend.
my pleasure to have you. You were fabulous. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, and I'll see you soon, I hope, in person.
I hope to see you